Hey now, today I'm going to make some apple pie cinnamon rolls, which are just really simple ooey gooey cinnamon buns with a really nice apple pie kind of twist to it. Really easy to make. I'm going to start off here and I've got a half cup of warm water, so it's in that 110 Fahrenheit sort of range. I've got a teaspoon of just white sugar. I'll just mix that in a little bit here to dissolve, and then I'm going to add some instant dried yeast, and this was 8 grams or like a package of that yeast. Just going to sprinkle that in. And we're going to let that sit probably about 10 minutes or so, just until it is nice and creamy. All right, so while the yeast is doing its thing, I've just warmed up a half cup of 2% milk, and I just turned off the heat because it's nice and warm. To that, I'm going to be adding a 1/4 cup of unsalted butter and a 1/4 cup of, again, white sugar and a teaspoon of just table salt there. And the trick here is to just kind of mix it up until everything melts and it's well combined, and then you want it to cool down to room temperature. All right, so now that this milk mixture has basically cooled down, I'm going to fire this into a mixing bowl. Get all of that in there. I'm also going to be adding the yeast, which has bloomed very nicely. Check that out. Get that into there. I've also taken 2 eggs and I have pre-beaten them here. So they are in this bowl, and we're going to add that in here too. And then lastly, I've got a bowl here with 4 cups of flour. We're not going to add all of it right off the bat here though. It's going to be probably right around 1.5 cups right off the bat, just to start things initially mixing. As long as you're going less than half, you're good. And stirring it now just to kind of combine it here a little bit, and then we'll switch out for the dough hook and start to add the rest of the flour. All right, so now at this point I'm going to be adding the rest of the flour about a half cup at a time, just until it sort of gets mixed in half decently, and until it's all in there, and we'll take a look at it at that point. All right, so now that everything's combined here, I'm going to have it mixed for probably close to 5 minutes, just on the second setting, until it's nice, smooth, and elastic. Okay, so after that 5 minutes, I'm just going to pop this thing off here. You can see what that looks like. I'm just going to flour one of my hands just so I can handle that dough. Pop it out here, and I'm just going to use some cooking spray. I'm going to oil in here. Take this dough, pop it in, and place it somewhere warm, covered up here, for probably about an hour, just until it's doubled in volume. Okay, so the next step is, while my dough is rising, I'm going to take some apples here. I'm going to peel them, and then I'm just going to cut them into smallish pieces. You'll see them in a minute here, and we're going to cook those up. So as you can see here, I chopped them up like this. So I just quartered the apples, cored them, sliced them, and then just kind of cut them like so, just dicing them up. Just going to give it a really quick little tiny blast of lemon juice, just for a little citric acid burst. And I'm now going to heat up my saucepan so that we can go ahead and pre-bake these. All right, so in this heavy saucepan here, I just basically melted a 1/4 cup of unsalted butter. And to that, I'm just going to add these diced apples. And I'm going to let them heat up and saute here just for a little bit, and then it's time to add a couple of little treats to that. Okay, here we are after about 10 minutes or so, and they're starting to soften up pretty decently. You'll notice that basically all the butter is either absorbed or kind of evaporated, whatever's going on there. So to that, I'm just going to throw in a little bit of a knob of butter there to melt in, because to this I'm going to be adding a 1/4 cup of brown sugar and a teaspoon of vanilla. So that vanilla can go in right now. Ooh, it smells awesome. And the sugar will go in too. And we're just going to let this kind of melt and combine. It will not take long. And then this is going to go into a bowl, and I'm just going to set it aside until we're ready to actually construct the cinnamon rolls themselves. So once it's just kind of like this here, I'm just going to bring it out. I'm not looking to burn that sugar or anything like that. So there we go. Now, while this is like this, and I'm still nice and warm here, I'm going to throw in basically just over 3/4 of a cup of butter. And we're going to let this melt here as well. And then I've got 3/4 of a cup of more brown sugar here. And we're going to get that all mixed together. So I still have the saucepan just a little above low. That butter's all pretty much melted. So in goes that sugar. And again, I'm not looking to cook this for too long. I just want to combine it so that it's not separated or separate. And once that's ready, I'm going to let it cool just a little bit while I go and snag a baking pan for this. So here we are, the butter and sugar mixture. And this is all going to go into like a 9x13 pan. This is where we're going to actually bake the rolls. And I like going with the Pyrex just because you're able to kind of see everything going on through the glass and see the bottom, which I find important. So just get this in here and let it chill down. And we're just kind of waiting on our dough now. And while we're waiting, you might as well take about 1/8 of a cup, just a couple of tablespoons of butter and get that melted because we're going to need that in a little bit. Well, after a couple hours, you can see this is definitely nicely risen. It's beautiful and poofy, and it is ready to be rolled out. So I'm just going to set this over here. And the goal here is to roll it out. I'm aiming for kind of 14 inches by 18 inches. And I'm just going to go about that. My rolling pin here. Won't take too terribly long. And once I have this all perfectly shaped, we'll take a look and then we'll get some toppings on it here. All right, so we're all laid out here really nicely. So the first thing I'm going to do is add the apples, the apple mixture here. And a lot of the times when you're making cinnamon buns, you want to brush this part of the dough with butter, but I've got 1/4 cup of butter in this mix. So when I spread it out, it's basically going to do that for me. Let's get the last little bit of it on here. So I'm going to just spread this around. And I'm going to come fairly tightly all the way around, except for this far end here. I want to leave probably at least a 1/2 inch space because I'm going to be rolling that direction, and that's going to make the seam for me there. As I send apples cascading onto that 1/2 inch. Just trying to spread them around decently. And then as soon as we've got this done, we're going to be adding our sugar mixture. And that, right over here, that's 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar and a tablespoon of cinnamon. And then it was all mixed up nicely. So I'd say that's probably good right there. Get the last of it on and mix this into it here. Just like so. This smells amazing. These apples are giving so much amazing aroma here to the kitchen. Can't wait for this. And that's the last of it right there. Super healthy dessert coming right up. So now we want to roll. So I'm just going to start just like this. I'm just going to carefully kind of roll it up evenly as much as possible. Oh, apples overboard. Over here too. Go just like that, and then I'm actually just going to roll this up towards it. Try to pinch it here. See if we can make that work. It's giving me a hard time. We'll see. So, since it's not wanting to pinch, I'm just going to roll it like this for a minute. And then I'm going to get my butter and brush it here in just a minute. All right, so glad I had this butter pre-melted. A nice little coating around, and this will just kind of help prevent it from wanting to each bun to stick to the next one quite as much. and let it brown up nicely, especially around the edges. Okay, let's just see here. I'm going to roll it a little bit more. A bit of a coating over here. Then it's time to cut it into its pieces, and I'm going to aim for around, well, probably exactly 15. Okay, so I marked them out. It was right around an inch each, and I'm just in the process here of slicing them. And I'm using a serrated knife, especially with those apple chunks in there. It really helps just slice through them in case there's several pieces that are running across that division line. So have them, and I can place them in here, and because I did get 15 pieces, I can go 3 by 5. Just like so. I'm going to cut the rest of these here. We'll get them all lined up, and then they're going to rise for about another hour or so. I'm going to cover them, let them rise. We'll preheat the oven to 375, and then we'll be ready to bake. All right, there we go. So, like I said, it's time just to cover these up and let them rise a little bit more here prior to baking. So, after an hour, you can tell these are obviously quite nicely risen, and they're all jammed into there. If we take a look at the bottom, we still have all that amazing gooiness going on in there. So, it is now time to pop these in. So, I've had this preheated at 375. We're going to give it probably about 25 minutes or so. All right, so after 23 minutes, these are looking like they are done. So now I'm just going to pull them out. I'm going to let them sit for a few minutes, and then we're going to flip them out onto a serving platter. All right, here we are. Moment of truth. Time to invert. And woo, there we are. Awesome. I'm just going to grab a rubber scraper and then, which I obviously did not have handy, and just get out any of this excess awesomeness onto these here. We'll let them cool down for just a little bit so that we don't burn our mouths on those hot chunks of apple and sugar. And then it's time for dessert. Oh my people, I am not going to torture you by making you watch me devour an entire one of these here right away, but I can maybe get a little testimonial. Are these yummy? Yeah, that's all you got to say? Yeah, these are amazing. The apples throughout just give you like the slightest bit of, it's not quite crunch because they are nicely baked, but a little bit of tartness. It is phenomenal. I'd say definite improvement over just the straight up cinnamon bun, but anyway, that's my opinion. So yeah, folks, till next time, keep her at 11.